Scientists here in Britain and in the United States are fast-tracking an Ebola vaccine that they hope will save lives. But there are still many unanswered questions like, will it actually work and is it actually ethical? The lead trial researcher is Professor Adrian Hill from the Jenner Institute at Oxford University. And he joins me now from Seattle, where he's attending a conference on global health. Professor Hill, welcome. And let's get straight to it. What kind of a success have you had in initial trials with this vaccine?
Thank you. Well, we've only been testing this vaccine since the middle of September, so we've immunized a relatively small number of individuals at the University Vaccine Centre in Oxford. And we really have two major objectives with this clinical trial. Firstly, to figure out if this vaccine is safe and therefore could be used to help control this outbreak. And secondly, to look at the type of immune responses that it produces in human beings for the first time to try and estimate whether it's actually likely to work.
Well, there's a picture that's been released. Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you. There's a picture that's been released of Ruth Atkins, who is the first healthy woman here in Britain to have been vaccinated, and we have that picture. And I'm wondering whether a lot of people might be quite worried when they see that picture, or hoping that it'll work in humans, because you've only really tested it in monkeys.
So before this clinical trial, the vaccine, as you say, had been tested in monkeys and was shown to be really quite remarkably protective in studies done at the National Institutes of Health here in the United States. That was with a single dose of vaccine, and that's what we're giving to our healthy volunteers. And so far, safety has looked fine in a limited number of individuals. But those safety data are enough for trials now to begin probably this week in West Africa. And of course, it's in the West African population that we really want to see good safety and good immune responses. But the difficult bit will be judging from that immune response that we produce by vaccination whether the vaccine is likely to work, because some people have called for this vaccine to be deployed without really any other evidence that it does work in people.
So there's that question, obviously, and then there's the other question that normally in the normal process of developing a vaccine, don't you do endless trials and spend a lot of time evaluating precisely what you're telling me now you need to figure out, whereas now you're evaluating and delivering at the same time?
Yes, this is frankly extraordinary. We are trying to do in a few months, something that might typically take 10 years. We've had accelerated reviews of all our applications, regulatory and ethical approvals and so on, and we got going in a few weeks. And we're now trying to proceed so quickly that if things go well, by the end of this year, this vaccine might actually be being used in the 3 affected countries in West Africa. And if that happens, that would be truly extraordinary. But by the end of the year, even if we have enough vaccine manufacture to start using it, we have enough data showing that it's safe, and we have measured lots of immune responses, that still doesn't tell us that it actually works. So we're going to have to figure out a way of using the vaccine and at the same time evaluating it. And there's a great deal of discussion about how you might do that now.
Exactly. And then there's an awful lot of discussion as well as to whether, precisely because of these issues you've raised, this is actually ethical. Do you have any trouble with that? Are you discussing that at your conferences and as you propose to distribute this?
So I don't think there's any discussion about whether it's ethical to use a vaccine in a phase 1 trial, such as the one we're doing at the moment, in very well-informed individuals who have 15 or 20 pages of information that they have to read about the trial and the possible risks. That's not the issue. The issue is, once you've shown safety in those individuals, do you go on to deploy the vaccine in a very large population, ideally of healthcare workers who are at greatest risk, without knowing that the vaccine actually works? Or instead, do you wait several months, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, to prove absolutely that the vaccine has a certain efficacy, and then start thinking about deploying it widely? And if you wait that long, the epidemic might either be over, or the whole thing might be completely out of control. So that's the challenge, to figure out what the best thing to do, given those conflicting priorities as I've described them.
Can I just ask you to weigh in? The CDC said there's potentially up to 1 million cases could develop if it's not brought under control in Africa by January. And with a so-called death rate of 70%, that would be, I mean, unbelievable, unbelievable. Can you walk us through those figures? Is it possible?
Well, I think the key word there is could. And the problem is that this is an Ebola outbreak like none ever before. It's in a different place. It's in West Africa, not Central Africa. It's lasted for months and months. Most are brought up under control quickly. It's now in major cities in West Africa. Normally it's a rural infection affecting a handful, maybe 100 people at most, and relatively easily controlled in those low-density populations in Central Africa. So we have no real way of gauging whether this is going to be 1 million people. I doubt that. I hope it's not. Or whether it could be gone by the end of the year. So all of those possibilities are possible, but I think those are extreme cases. You know, there's some indication that things may be flattening out a little bit in Guinea, but not in Liberia. But we just don't know, and we have to use every intervention that might be useful and accelerate its progress towards deployment that we have today.
Professor Hill, thank you very much. And obviously everybody's wishing the best for a vaccine that could save so many lives. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.